Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Brandy Horton, and I am the Vice President of Communications at Rails to Trails Conservancy. We have a really fun conversation for everyone today about just, what does it take to be physically active in our communities? What's the infrastructure we need? What are the programs we need? Just, how do we get ourselves out there and active? And before we dig in, I'm going to let my group here that's joining me introduce themselves. And so I'm going to start with the person that I see first, which is Sharita. Why don't you introduce yourselves and we'll pass it down the line.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Shrita Bozeman. As the Senior Manager of Health here in North America for Special Olympics, I support programs through several focus areas, including ongoing prevention and fitness throughout the lifespan in schools and fitness through sport. And I also share some of our inclusive health strategies in collaboration with our state programs and affiliates, our Special Olympics staff, and external health stakeholders.
Erin, you want to jump in next?
Yeah, thank you. Erin McDaniel, Special Olympics Kansas Health and Fitness Manager. I serve all of our 5,500 athletes that are under our umbrella of our program and all of their health and fitness efforts. So that looks like a lot of different fitness programming that we have, and then also on the health side with our health screenings.
That's great. Thank you. And Ken.
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. My name is Ken Rose. I lead Active People Healthy Nation at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I should remember that. Our goal is to get 27 million people more physically active by 2027.
Well, part of what we're going to talk about today is, how do we do that? What does it take? What does it take to get there? And this conversation is part of our virtual series for Celebrate Trails Day. So for those of you following along at home, Celebrate Trails Day is April 27th, and it is a moment that we're creating across the country. We do every year to get as many people outside on trails as possible. Part of that is so that everyone can experience the joy and the fun and the just real kind of meaning of being active in these spaces, but also it's a chance for us to showcase why these spaces are so important to the health and the well-being and the vitality of the places where we live and where we work and where we play. So that is the kind of the anchor of our conversation this afternoon, and really looking forward to digging in with you all. We're going to start with a first question for you, Ken. Really just help people understand when we're talking about physical activity, we're talking about why this is important in the country. How are we doing as a nation when it comes to being physically active?
Well, I'll start by just saying we could do better. But I do want to talk a little bit about what we mean by physical activity. And basically what we mean is just something that gets you moving and gets your heart pumping. Think about an activity where it's easy to talk, but not so easy to sing. And if you're like me, most people don't want to hear you sing anyway. So, but why is physical activity important? Well, it's important because, just going for a short walk or a roll on your local trail will reduce your feelings of anxiety. It will improve your sleep and reduce your blood pressure. That's just one walk. You can feel better today just by going for a walk on your local trail. But if you integrate that walk into your life over time, you will see reductions in risk of 8 cancers, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and depression. So it is both something that you can do today to improve your health and something you can do 10 years from now to improve your health. So when we talk about physical activity, we really want to think about it as something that is fun. It isn't something that is no pain, no gain. It's something that brings you joy, but also moves your body. And trails are a great way to do this in your communities. So you did ask the question, how are we doing? Well, we measure physical activity. If you're out there, we want you to get either 150 minutes of the no singing variety, but you can also get 75 minutes of the no talking variety, depending on what you choose to do, running or cycling. And unfortunately, in this country right now today, only about 1 in 4 people actually fully meets physical activity guidelines, 1 in 6 young people, and fully 1 in 4 people are completely inactive. I should note a couple things about those data. Those data measure physical activity in your free time. not in when you're working or transportation time, which trails are really good for walking and biking. I should also note that it measures strengthening exercises, which you should also be doing 2 30-minute sessions a week. So at CDC, our goal is to get 27 million people more physically active, as I said, by 2027 through Active People Healthy Nation. We fund about 83 places across the country to implement these strategies at state and local levels. So trails are an essential component to providing that opportunity for people to build that physical activity into their daily lives.
It's so interesting, Ken, and it's hard to wrap your head around. 1 in 4 people, 1 in 6 young people kind of not meeting those targets, and the implications of that for our own health and well-being, for our communities, and how our communities are doing, and for just the nation as a whole, the economic impact of that, the physical health impact of that, the mental health impact of that. And I think about in the work that we do, we talk to a lot of people all of the time about the priorities that they have, about the ways that their communities are being built and designed. And we talk about barriers to trail use or barriers to kind of physical activity. And we often hear it's like, I don't know where to go. I don't know where maybe the trail goes. I have to drive to the trail in my community because it's not connected to the place that I live. And that has implications for everyone, but I think it especially has implications for people who maybe can't or don't drive in particular. And so we're talking about younger folks, we're talking about older folks, we're talking about people with disabilities. And getting ready for this conversation, I was talking, Sharita, to one of your colleagues about a story of a woman in Philadelphia region who has been in a wheelchair for most of her life. She met one of our board members when she was a physical therapist, and she had recently reconnected with our board member, and she shared that she was now getting outside and getting physical activity every single day without the support of an aide. And my board member shared with me, she said, and you want to know how? And I said, how? And she said, they made an extension on the Chester Valley Rail Trail, and it goes literally to her apartment building. So her aide is in the house, her aide can get her ready to go, and then she leaves. And she gets this like hour or 90 minutes of independence, which is incredible, fresh air and physical activity. And that is something that she otherwise could not do. And it really just kind of sparked some of this conversation for today about community-based infrastructure. So, we're not getting we're not running and walking to the point where we are not able to sing, unfortunately. But how does, and Sharita, I'm going to target this question to you. How does community-based infrastructure make a difference there, especially in the work that the Special Olympics is doing?
I would say, obviously, this is related to social determinants of health. We know that where you live, work, and play put you at risk for poor health outcomes. So having accessible trails not only helps to improve well-being for people with both physical limitations and developmental disabilities, but well-built environments also encourage better physical and mental health and well-being for all. We've seen an uptake in walking clubs really since the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of those clubs have remained. In Special Olympics Northern California, they have about 13 walking club seasons since 2020, since the pandemic, and they've collected over 103,000 miles to date. So we know that this level of activity is kind of the way we sort of get our athletes to get moving and get started. It's an easy way to take up physical activity. And we're always encouraging our Special Olympics programs to collaborate on the local level with parks and rec centers, and to really advocate for the inclusivity of places and spaces like trails and as well as gyms, to make them more inclusive for all. Our athletes are also tracking. That's one of the big things that we do in a lot of our fitness challenges. We just finished our Sona Move challenge, where we had about 300 participants across the country participating in that challenge. And a lot of that was focused on our Fit 5 and our Strong Mind, so emotional well-being, but also moving their bodies more and focusing on water and nutrition. But a lot of the starts of that physical activity is walking. And so that tracking is done through apps. Our SoFit Now app. It is also done through your Apple Watches, your Fitbits, or your Move Band. So those are ways that we're seeing athletes really kind of taking charge of their own health and being able to track those numbers and really see how they're improving their health overall. So our goal this year is to get about 50,000 athletes in the US And that includes about 10,000 in schools and 8,000 in our fitness challenges.
Oh, that's really great. And the tracking component of that so that you can see the progress you're making, you know, if you're hitting those physical activity targets, it's really exceptional. And I think building those connections between not just it's important to do this, but where are the spaces where you can do this and how do you kind of make that part of, you know, your day to day or part of your routine so that then it's something that's happening. And I think, Erin, that's my segue over to you. And just wanting to hear a little bit about what's happening in Kansas to really build those connections between the Special Olympics and the Special Olympians and the trails that are in your region.
Yeah, I think especially in urban areas, we see like a huge influx of trails that are available. But I think, traditionally we look at trails as, your little nice nature trail that you might walk around like a man-made park in or a man-made pond in a park and things like that. But, I think our point in really connecting our athletes to their community trails and trails that are within their direct community is one, we want to build their self-confidence and get them comfortable around those trails since they are around where they live and maybe shop or maybe work. And so I think, one of the biggest things that we implemented is just getting the community involved and getting them out with their athletes to get them more comfortable using those trails because they might be specially curated trails that help them get to their grocery store and they might not even be aware that that's something that, they could be using this entire time. And, to your point of self-efficacy, them being able to go out on their own and realize, I feel comfortable now stepping out. So, with our Treats and Trails program, I think it's just really fostering that relationship between our athletes and the safety of the trail and building their self-confidence and self-efficacy to then go out and use it on their own. But I think bringing all of those different community prongs into one, having our law enforcement there, random shops that might, come out and that you might meet along the trail, or if, you feel uncomfortable, that's somebody that you've met before, you can run into the shop and engage with them. I think, that's a huge part of why trails are so important to us is, building that self-efficacy for them to be able to do it on their own, whether or not they're using it, to get places for transportation or for just mental health purposes and just for fitness purposes.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of, the businesses out there and the police out there and the members of the community out there. We talk a lot about how trails build community. And we also know a lot from the research that community is a key motivator to physical activity, right? If you've got a buddy or you've got people you're doing this with, or, one of the things I always laugh about is when I bike commute to work, I use the trail by my house. There's one person that I can always tell if I'm late or not because they always push I think they're a caregiver for a little kid. And they're always pushing a baby in a stroller. And if I go by that person at one certain mile marker, I'm like, I better hustle up a little bit. I'm running behind this morning. But this is a person I probably would never meet otherwise in my life. And I think that sense of community and bringing people of all abilities and all backgrounds together in this shared space where, Ken, to your point, there's joy. There's a shared experience of like happiness and fun. And oh, guess what? We're also getting a little activity in too. We're doing something good for our bodies at the same time. I want to go back to the notion of being able to kind of go to the grocery store or go to different places. And Ken, I'm going to flip this over to you and just a little bit, want to dig in a little bit on how important is it to have kind of trails, connected trail systems, the ability to kind of get where you want to go in helping people meet those physical activity targets?
Well, I mean, trails are essential to connect people to destinations. I mean, as you talked about, Erin, it's got to be more than a trail that goes around a lake and a park. And the science shows that if you are in a community where you have those trails, those safe places to walk and bike to get to your everyday destinations, and you can integrate that physical activity into your daily life, to go to the store, to go to church, to go to the library, to go to school, it doesn't become physical activity then, it just becomes going to the school. And if you can do that, then you see population increases in physical activity at the community level. That's why we support this strategy. That's because it gets us to higher levels of physical activity that people don't even know they're getting. So super important from that perspective.
I've been super interested to follow some of the research that CDC has been doing about how we talk about physical activity, whether we talk about exercise or we talk about how our bodies are moving, and the things that really do kind of hold people back in terms of perception, like, I don't want to exercise, but I'll walk to the school and get those minutes in. Yeah, Sharita.
I was gonna say, sign me up for that, because when you're moving your body and you're not really focused on it, that's when it's easier.
Yeah.
I really applaud Atlanta, where CDC is based, with the Beltline in Atlanta, because I saw that for myself a few months ago, being able to walk around the Beltline and see shops and stores, and you can stop for groceries, and it's amazing. And I really think a lot of communities should really sort of follow that urban design and plan, and how to connect those different places, as Ken mentioned, places of worship, places to grab your food or have a coffee. But it makes it a lot easier, because I did get in by walking. I got in a few miles by using that belt line, but you didn't notice that you were walking as much. And so I think that's what helps people move a little bit more, is when they're not totally focused on it, and it's just a means to get to the next place.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. I think that's 100% right. I want to talk a little bit about Celebrate Trails Day, this big thing that's happening here in a couple of weeks. We have.
Can I say one more thing
Oh,
about
yeah,
science?
yeah, please do jump right in.
Sorry.
Oh, good. No,
I
you're
can't
doing
help
great.
myself. So one of the things I do also want to talk about is trails in the rural setting, because we have science there as well, right? So I talked about more of that environment where, you're in a small town or a larger place where you can, you've got those destinations immediately accessible to you from a walking and biking distance. But the other thing that's really important to note is that trails in and of themselves are green space, right? So in many places, they're greenways. And we also know that access to those trails and greenways has additional health benefits. And so it particularly, I think, in the rural context, it provides you that linear greenway, which gives the broader population more access to that green space. So think of it as a linear park. And in that way, we know that access to parks as well improves health and increases physical activity.
I'll layer right on top of that. The other thing I think is really exciting just about what's happening in the country right now is that there are over 150 trail networks in development nationwide. And that includes every single state. So, the most remote states that we have, the most dense states that we have trail networks in development. And I think it sends a really important message that connectivity matters, whether you're in a rural, suburban, or an urban space. What that looks like might be different in different spaces. The distances might be different. But the idea that you're building connections between people and places that serve the community's priorities, that serve the residents that live alongside there, and make it possible for people to build physical activity into their everyday lives. The fact that it's applicable in so many places, I think is really fundamental. And that's new. This development is really exciting. If you go back 10, 15 years, there were a handful of trail networks. It was this really new idea. And people were like, how does this work? And is there, are there enough trails? And what does this look like? And you can't put a railroad corridor right where you want. So how do you connect? But I think the growing understanding of active transportation infrastructure, how to make it safer for people to walk and bike where they want to go. It can be protected bike lanes that connect to trails. There's lots of ways to do this. I think that has really shifted things. The pandemic has shifted things. Sharita, I was so glad to hear you talk about the walking clubs and just the impact of the stickiness of those behaviors. The same is true for just trail use across the board. People are continuing, we're not as high as we were in March and April of 2020, but where it has plateaued is far higher than it was pre-pandemic. And I think all of that is driving communities to look at how they're building these spaces so that it can serve, more people in their communities. And I saw you put your hand up, Sharita.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'd love to hear that Aaron and Special Olympics Kansas is partnering with LETR, or Law Enforcement Torch Run. I think that's a huge part of trails too, is making sure those environments are safe. I think typically when I think of rural trails, you think of safety and serene and calmness. And a lot of times people who live in urban areas are not comfortable utilizing their trails and spaces because they're worried about safety. So I think that's another part of it too, is this is where our law enforcement partners can help out in helping to improve the health of the community. It's also making those trails safer for all.
Yeah. And building those relationships at the community level, right? And showing, I love when law enforcement is involved in that kind of programming, because I think it changes the relationship. People see them in a different light, and I think it's so important to that community aspect of this. So I'm going to shift us over here to just a question about programming activation of space. So one of the things we do on Celebrate Trails Day is we ask people, what did you do today? And how much time were you physically active outside on your trail? And we ask them to also share what they typically do in a day, so that we can see, what are the minutes of physical activity we're generating. And this is self-reported, but, it gives us a little bit of an idea of what would you do on a typical day. And because there was a program or something to get you out there, what did you do? And last year, Celebrate Trails Day generated 1.3 million minutes of physical activity that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So, Erin, I'm gonna start this question for you, and I'm gonna kind of have everyone answer it. But just the idea of whether it's national programming, like what's happening across the country on April 27th, or programming that's happening in a community, why are these kinds of moments so important? Why does that make a difference for people getting outside and getting active?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I don't think I can say this enough, but that sense of community. I think our athletes constantly, I mean, there are just so many disparities. There's so many quality of life disparities that they have. And I think there's nothing more powerful than a community all coming together for one purpose. So whether that's to celebrate trails, or to celebrate individuals with IDD specifically on trails, or even just getting involved in fitness. I think the more individuals around your life that can somehow compound to help you continue these healthy habits beyond just that one event, that's how we're honestly going to make big changes within our communities. And then starting at those grassroots levels, and of course we're going to hopefully see metrics and statistics from the CDC go up in future research. But I really think I believe in gym buddies, but I really think the more support that you have, no matter what it is, the better things are going to be in the long run. So I think these one-off events really just are a catalyst to future things that you might have going on in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Catalyzing people's kind of everyday behavior change. That's incredible. Sharita, what about you? What do you think? Why do you think these kinds of things make a difference?
Well, I mean, I think we're so grateful for this partnership that you have with Special Olympics Kansas. We want to see this sort of replicated throughout our state programs to see how we can really encourage the use of trails. We've shared the information about Celebrate Trails Day, and we're really excited to see. We are a sports organization, so I might have to put a challenge out there. I shared the information, but we might have to make it a challenge so that way states are competing between one another.
Perfect. I love it.
Who gets the most steps in on that day. So we're really excited to see how this partnership can grow. And we're really excited to celebrate with you all.
That's great. And Ken, I think there's some science behind programming and activating space.
Yeah, absolutely.
You to
So
close us up.
I wanted to say, community is so important for physical activity. I mean, having a trail is important, no doubt about it. It's necessary, but it's also necessary to have the community using the trail and to activate the trail. And we call that in our world social supports, but absolutely essential to getting more people to be active. Super excited about your 1.1 million minutes. That's amazing. We're also really proud to partner with Special Olympics at CDC as well. And for us, I mean, we have Active People Healthy Nation. We'd love everybody to sign up. All you have to do is Google it, Active People Healthy Nation, and it'll come up. And if you want to learn more about what's happening, you can learn it there.
And I think the takeaway message here is, there are so many opportunities for us to support each other and getting those physical activity minutes in and kind of hitting those targets, because it's good for us and it's good for our neighbors and it's good for our friends and our family and it's good for the country. And to get there, we need the places to do it, and we need those places to be kind of close to home and easy to access, but we also need that community being built around it, because it's what brings the joy. It's what brings the impact of this work. So thank you all for being such wonderful partners, and looking forward to celebrating trails with y'all on April 27th.